Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today, we're going to talk about the difference between being scared and there being a real danger. Okay, so that's a very important distinction that, as a new concealed carrier, you have to be aware of. Okay, and this video and the series of videos that I've been doing goes out primarily to the new concealed carriers across the United States. Um, and just to give you guys an example, you might be alone in your house at night, and there might be thunder and lightning outside, and maybe that's scaring you. Okay, but the chances that the lightning is going to hit your house and your house is going to burn down, you're going to die in it, are pretty tiny. Okay, so that's an example of you being scared, but you know the level of danger that's present is really tiny. Okay, and you're probably in the best place that you can be, which is inside your house. Okay, now to give you another example, like you might have a group of people standing at the edge of your property. Okay, maybe that makes you feel uncomfortable. You don't know what they're doing there. But here's the thing, you're uncomfortable. Maybe you're scared. Uh, Maybe their car just broke down or something, and they're waiting for a ride. Okay, so in that sense, you are now you're really scared of the unknown. Okay, so you gotta have a good sense of what are you scared of. Okay, are you scared because you just don't know, because you're uncomfortable, or are you scared because you've actually identified and assessed a real threat or potential threat to you? Okay, so that's one of the things you gotta have a very firm grasp of if you're gonna start carrying a gun. Okay, and also the way that you react to threats and dangers, you have to like try to get a handle on. So for example, are you the type of person where if you hear, let's say, noises in the night, you get panicked and startled, and as a result of that you act in like an unpredictable or irrational manner? All right, if that's the case, you got to get a handle on that before you start thinking about using a firearm for self-defense, because that noise that you're hearing might be an unexpected family member showing up at your house. Okay, or it might be something like your neighbor who lives next door is drunk, and you know what, he mistook his house for your house because they kind of look the same, stumbled in, and basically realized that it was in the wrong house and then stumbled back out. Okay, so you got to be able to assess what's going on. That's clearly not a situation where you would need or should use deadly force. Okay, now all these things tend to happen really quickly. Okay, so you got to be able to kind of think on your feet and make fast decisions. Now, one of the things that I do, that I recommend to people that I train, in order to help you make fast decisions while under stress, is basically take a couple of boxing classes. And I don't mean boxing classes where you're just hitting a bag. I mean boxing classes where you actually get into the ring with an instructor and you do some light sparring. Okay. Now you don't, I've trained. I used to be a boxing instructor, and I trained lots of new people, introduced this to them. Usually what happens is for the first couple of weeks, we hit the bags. I teach them a couple of, basically I teach them the different punches, different combinations. At some point, I put them in the boxing ring, and we do light sparring. Okay, so before we start sparring, we calibrate. Basically, I'm gonna lightly tap them. Of course, we're wearing a protective headgear. We got padded gloves on. But when you get hit in the face, I mean, you feel it. You'll feel it through the padding. You'll jar your head a little bit. Okay. And what I'll do is I'll calibrate with them, where I hit them lightly so that they know what type of punches to expect from me, and also what type of punches I expect coming back, as far as the power level of the punches. And basically we start sparring, and we do that for a couple of weeks. And what's going to happen is the first couple of times they get hit, they might get a little, really discombobulated, right? And usually I'll start off really, really light and then slowly pick up the level. But I'm teaching them to be able to think and act through the punches, right? To be able to, to be in an uncomfortable situation, especially as they start getting tired. right? Because believe it or not, you get really tired when you're in a boxing room really quickly, regardless of what shape you're in. And I teach them to think on their feet, to be able to take the punches and think through it and return fire. So I think that that is a great way to teach people to be able to identify and assess threats or potential threats under stress. Okay. Um, so and again, we're not talking about trying to make you a boxing champ. I'm just talking about get into a boxing ring, under the guidance of an instructor, and learn to take punches and think through it and continue to function. Okay, because I mean, in my life, I've met lots of people that, like, if they get like startled, they do really weird things. Okay, and like I'm thinking to myself, okay, I hope this person doesn't sleep with a gun under their pillow. Okay, because they're, I mean, when they get startled, they act in a very. I've seen people act in a very unpredictable manner, and that's one of the things that you have to get a handle on. If that applies to you, and I'm not saying that it does, but if that applies to you, you have to get a grip on that, and you have to be able to function through that. Okay, and assess, what the threat level is. What do you have to do? Where do you have to move? What calls do you have to make? And also be able to observe. To be able to observe, let's say, what the person's wearing, what direction they're moving in, what are they saying, who are they communicating with, right? If it's like an outside the house type of situation. So you got to be able to do all this stuff um, under uncomfortable circumstances. Okay, so getting in the boxing ring is going to help you develop that skill. Okay, so next thing I want to talk about with regards to being scared versus there being an actual danger, it helps if you have a plan in place. Okay, so in in an inside the home type situation, if you hear, let's say, noises or banging on the door, stuff like that, it would help you gain control of the situation and be able to quickly identify and assess if there's a real danger by having a plan in place. And that plan would include, having a designated safe room, getting your family members in that room, getting yourself into a position where you feel that you have better control of the situation. And if, for example, it ends up being a situation where you do need to use a firearm, you want to know which direction your bullets are going into, right? So there's different rooms in your house. You can decide you want to be in this room. I guess let's say if you're in this room, bullets are going this way. But if you're in that room, bullets are going that way. Well, you got to figure out where those bullets going. Okay, like in my situation, I want to be at the top of my staircase, shooting down towards my basement. Okay, I got all my bad guys in the tight corridor. All right, and I know where my bullets are going. They're going into my basement. Okay, so having a home defense plan, all right, is going to help put certain things on autopilot, so that you can, you want to clear as much of your stuff off your plate as possible, so you can deal with the new information that's coming in, like what's happening, versus trying to tell your wife and kids, go to that room, do this, call 911. You want to put all that stuff on autopilot, and if you can have a home defense plan, that's going to take that's going to make it a lot easier for you to identify and assess what is going on and what you need to do. Okay, and of course you want to have a weapon plan, right? Wear your guns, um, you know, getting access to the guns. But while you're doing this, if you got another adult in the house, their job might be to, let's say, be calling 911 or looking out the window, for example, to tell you if there's any cars outside or any unknown cars outside, or being a lookout for the police when they show up, so they can communicate that information to you. All right, so that's gotta be part of your plan. You gotta have that home defense plan, and the other thing is you gotta, if you, let's say you got banging outside your house, right? You don't know what it is. I mean, at this point, you just hear banging. Nobody's breaking in. At the point that they're breaking in, you kind of know it's like something is seriously wrong. Okay, but if you're hearing banging outside, it could be lots of different things. For one thing, um, it might be your neighbor banging because something happened. Maybe I had a situation one time where one of my neighbors was banging because their dog passed away. Okay, and there were two elderly people, and they needed my help to deal with this was a large dog that passed away. Okay, so it was like in the middle of the night. They were like, because this was the pet that they had for many years, and they were like frantic. They were not, I mean, I think the dog was in the process of passing away, so they were frantic. I was the closest person to them. The banging on my door, and of course, that's not a situation where I want to go to the door, you know, you know, um, holding an AR-15 in my hands. Okay, um, I mean, that for one thing, that would scare the shit out of my neighbor unnecessarily. The other thing is that banging on the door might be a police officer, right? Because again, something might have happened that I'm not aware of. Okay, for example, let's say a family member of mine got into an accident or something. They might be trying to notify me. Okay, um, whatever, so that's one of the things that you have to consider. Like, you don't know who's banging on your door, unless they're actually breaking in. You want to be careful about how you go to that door. I don't want to go to that door with an AR-15 slung across my chest to answer. First of all, I want to talk through the door to try and get an idea of who this is, what they want. If they tell me it's the police, I can call 911 to confirm it's the police. Or in my case, I got windows, so I can clearly see, who's out there, because I can kind of see off from the side. So that's one of the things that you want to assess. Now, if I'm going to answer the door, I'm probably not going to answer it with a rifle. I'm going to keep the rifle in my safe room. I'm going to answer the door with my gun concealed. Okay, so again, if it's my neighbor, or if it's a family member, or if it's the police, I'm not answering the door with a gun that's visible. Okay, and these are things that I would normally do, right? But the difference here is that we're adding the scared element. Okay, so just because we've added the scared element doesn't automatically introduce the danger element. Okay, so being scared and there being an actual real danger, the two are not necessarily connected. Okay, so that's one of the things now you might have a situation where you have a burglar breaking into your house. Okay, so the thing to understand with burglars is they're coming in because they don't think anybody's there. They're coming there to take property, right? And if they realize that there's somebody in the house, they're gonna want to leave. Okay, they're gonna try and get out of the house as fast as possible. So that's not necessarily a situation where I would need to use a firearm, because they are not a deadly threat to me. Now, they could potentially be one, so I definitely want to be armed. Okay, but that's a situation where I would address them verbally. If they want to run away, let them run away. It's not my job to try and arrest them, right? Or if now you might have a situation where they freeze. If they freeze, you need to take command. You need to take control of the situation, right? Because you can't have like two people that are like frozen looking at each other. You've got to take control of the situation, and don't point the gun at them, right? Because in most states, pointing a gun at somebody is an assault. Okay, so if he doesn't need a gun pointed at him, don't point a gun at him. You can have it in a holster. It's inside your home. You can have it displayed, but don't point the gun at him, because if you point the gun at him, first of all, you could have an accidental discharge. Okay, not that you should have one, right? But but I'm just saying, because your finger's off trigger, that shouldn't be an issue. But if you point the gun at somebody, you're going to increase the chance of potentially, having a type of situation that you don't want to have. Okay, so don't point the gun at them, but do take command of the situation. And what I tell people is, tell them to lay down on the ground, facing away from you, hands out, legs open, right? Verbally, don't go near him. Okay, verbally. Again, this is a situation where he's frozen. You want him on the ground, palms up, right? And why palms up? Like this, because if they're gonna jump up, they gotta turn their hands like this, so that gives you a second to react to something like that. Okay, so now if they decide they want to get up and run out, let them. As long as they're not running in your direction, that's fine. Let them run out. Okay. So again, this is a situation where you're going to be very scared, but it doesn't, and there's obviously a danger element. Okay, but the danger doesn't need to necessarily rise to the level of you needing to use deadly force. Okay, so if you got a burglar, put him in the act, you know, you have to be able to identify and assess what's going on, and if you don't need to use deadly force, don't use deadly force, because that's going to really make your life very, very complicated. Okay, you're going to have difficulties that you really don't want to. Right, so in general, you want to avoid that situation as much as possible. Okay, um, I mean, I don't want to go into the details of all the things that will happen after that, but if ideal situation is that you don't have to use a firearm, because if you don't end up using a firearm, if you don't end up having to shoot somebody, well, the next day your life is going to continue the way it always has. Okay, so in my case, I get to come here and I get to play with guns. Okay, so I get, next day is going to be another fun day for me. Okay, if it goes the other way and I end up using a gun in self-defense, even if it's a self-defense type of situation, the next day is going to be very different for me. Okay, I'm not going to have a fun day where I just come here and I get to do the things I normally do. There's other things that's going to be happening. That's going to interrupt my life. It's going to interfere. My life may never go back to being the way it was. So if I would prefer to avoid that. Okay, if I can keep things going happily the way they're going, I would be very happy. Okay, so that's an ideal situation. You got to be aware of that. So you might have a burglar. A burglar is not necessarily a deadly threat to you, but they might become one, and if they do, you got to deal with it at that level. Okay, again, you might have neighbors or family that show up unexpectedly. Not you might have a situation where you have a family member shows up, they don't think anybody's home, and they might think it's a good idea to break into the house, whatever. I'm not saying that they should, but they might. Okay, but it's still a family member. Obviously, you don't want to shoot a family member. So again, you got to be able to identify and assess the situation to decide what's happening and what do you need to do. Okay, I mean, obviously in that situation, if they're breaking into your house, you're going to be very upset with them. Okay, but you certainly don't need to use a firearm in that situation. Okay, and again, you got to be aware of the potential of a police action that's happening. Now, it might be a situation where they're coming to your house to notify you of something, or maybe or it might be a situation where somebody swatted you, right? Where they said, "Hey, that guy over there, he's kidnapped 3 people and he's holding them in their house," and they show up at your house with a full SWAT team because of this false information they've been given. Okay, I mean, if you answer the door armed, I mean, they're gonna shoot you. Okay, regardless of whether they were wrong or you're not wrong, none of that matters. If you answer the door armed, and there's police behind that door, they're gonna shoot you. You're not gonna win that fight. Okay, so that's gonna pretty much, your life is not going to continue the next day the way it's been, the way it's been going. Okay, so you want to avoid that. And again, that goes back to being able to identify and sit and assess what's actually happening. Okay, scared is not enough. There has to be a real danger. So, in a situation where you are scared, okay, don't panic, assess. Okay, retreat. Now I understand that in the idea of retreating sounds almost cowardly, right? And I totally understand that. But retreating, there's also such a thing as a strategic retreat, right? You're pulling back to a better defensive position where you can better observe and decide what's happening and what you need to do. So retreating, is not necessarily a bad thing. Okay, and it could also help you in court, even if it's a matter of just moving a couple of feet back. When you discuss this with your lawyer, I mean, hey, even if it's a couple of feet back, you made an attempt to retreat. That could help your case significantly. Okay? So don't look at the word retreat as necessarily a bad thing. Think of it as a strategic thing that can help you tactically in that situation just by getting you into a better position. But it could also help you legally, okay, in the aftermath. Okay. Vocal warnings, yes, they're a good idea, but make sure that they don't sound threatening. Okay, so don't be like, step back. I have a gun. I'm I'm gonna shoot you. Don't do any of that, because now they're gonna if this escalates, right? They're gonna say that you were provoking the situation, all right? So your vocal warnings are purely get back. I don't want to deal with you. Get out of the house, or what? Leave it at that, okay? But you do have to draw a line. You gotta draw a line where, if this person, let's say in the home situation, if they come into your bedroom, that's where you draw the line. Like, obviously they shouldn't be in your bedroom, or whether it's at your doorstep. They can't come into your house, but you got to draw a line somewhere. All right, you got to know that, hey, if this happens, I do this. If that happens, I do that. You got to have that kind of in your head, because it's really hard to make those type of decisions while there's a lot of stuff happening. Okay, so you do want to have kind of like a plan in your head, whether it's inside your home or outside in public, of where that line is. Like, for example, with using outside the home, using a firearm for self-defense. Basically, what that line would be is they have to draw a firearm, right? They have to be going to a firearm, okay, or a knife. Okay, so that would be like drawing the line somewhere. Okay, they can yell, scream, all right, that's fine. I don't care about that. But if they're going for a firearm, now I gotta act. Okay, or it might be that you might have a situation where they might be standing over there holding a stick, but if they come within 3 or 4 feet of me, now that's a different situation. I have to act. I gotta do something. So these are all things that you want to think through and figure out where the lines are for different types of situations. Okay, and here's the thing. That's kind of like a guideline. Doesn't mean that you have to follow that. But the more things that you can think of in advance, the more it's gonna make this a little easier for you. Okay. Now, let's talk about this. The way a lot of times that conflicts happen is they escalate. So a lot of times they'll start from with words, then it'll go to hands, then it'll go to weapons. Okay, and it doesn't have to move from one level to the other. So you can be in a situation where you are yelling and screaming, cursing with somebody. Okay, it doesn't need to go to the next level of hands. Okay. And if you feel that it's about to go over to that next level, it's probably a good idea to pull yourself back, and assess, is it worth it for me for this to go to the next level of hands, where this can get really messy. Now, even, because getting into a fist fight in public, I mean, one thing that can get you carry permit pulled. Okay, so so that's one of the things that you gotta be careful. You gotta ask yourself, is it worth getting to the next level? Now, if you do end up in that next level of hands, okay, just because I'm in a fist fight with somebody and I'm carrying a gun doesn't mean that it needs to go from hands to gun. Okay, so be comfortable with that idea. Again, going back to what I said originally, get into the boxing ring, get comfortable with getting hit and hitting other people. Okay, again, this is obviously not a situation that you want to be in, but if you find yourself in that situation, you don't want to get hit in the face and then all of a sudden it's like you're drawing a blank. Oh my God, he's now gonna kill me. I need to go to my gun. That's not necessarily what's happening. So if you've taken a couple of boxing classes and you've been hit a couple of times, you will be able to better assess what's happening and not panic when you get hit, and continue to deal with that situation, versus if you've never been hit and all of a sudden you get hit, it's like, oh my God, this guy's trying to kill me. Okay, and that might be how you are perceiving this, but that's not how the rest of the world is perceiving the situation. Okay, you think that this person is hitting you with a steel glove. The rest of the world might be seeing this person, whatever, slapping you or something. Okay, so you gotta be able to assess what's really happening, and try to keep it at that level, or try to scale it back. Don't let it get to the next level. Okay, so that's a really important thing. Okay? Now, if something does happen and you go to weapon, if events rise to the level where the danger level rises to the level where you need to use deadly force. In most states, the only time you can use deadly force is to prevent death, rape, kidnapping, or serious bodily harm. Okay, those are the levels that it has to rise to that level so that you will be justified in using deadly force. there's usually nothing in the law that covers warnings. Okay, so if you might think that you're issuing warnings to to try and prevent the situation from escalating, but in fact, to a third party, that might look like you're provoking the situation. Okay, so one of the things I tell people is, you definitely don't try to display or refer to your gun in terms of a warning, right? Because to the outsiders, that's going to look like a threat. So the only time you go to your gun is if it rises to the level of the gun needing to be used. Okay, prior to that, you have other options, right? You've got legs where you can leave, right? You've got a mouth where you can tell people to stay back, right? You can tell somebody to stay back. I don't want to do this. You can give those type of warnings, um, which is good because other people looking on, they're going to hear that, and later on, that will be very useful if for those witnesses to be able to say that you were telling this person to get back and you weren't interested and didn't want to get involved with it. So that's a very important reason to give verbal warnings. It's not just what you're telling to that person, but you're also drawing the attention of other people to see what's happening, because you don't want them to just hear a bang and then all of a sudden there's a guy laying on the ground and you're holding the gun. Okay, you want them to see this situation escalate. So you want them to see you, telling this person to get back. You want them to see you trying to retreat, right? And then this person does something, whatever, pulls out a gun, and then you respond. Okay, so you want them to see all of that stuff. So that's why a reason why we issue verbal warnings, but you don't want to issue the type of verbal warning that's going to be perceived as you're the person that's being the threat. You don't want to say, "Hey, get back or I'll shoot you," because that's how other people might perceive that. Okay. So if something happens and you have to use deadly force, as soon as you assess that there's no longer a threat, right? You're gonna look around, right? You need to reholster the gun as fast as possible. You gotta get that gun back in the holster because other people coming onto the scene, they don't know what happened. They don't know who you are. They may not know what that person just tried to do. They just see him bleeding, you holding a gun. It might be police, it might be other civilians. He might start shooting you. Okay, so get the gun back in the holster as soon as possible. Try to put in that call to 911 to make them aware that you're the victim, right? That somebody was trying to kill you, and you needed to use your gun in self-defense. Give a description of yourself, so when the police arrive at the scene, they have some sense of what happened. You're not going to go into details, but you want them to know that you're the victim. You want to make that clear to them. That person attacked you. You needed to defend yourself. Okay. You can tell that to 911. Tell it to the to the officers when they arrive. Okay. You want to point out the evidence, right? There's his gun. There's his knife. Here are my shell cases, because that's an indication of the proximity, how close you were to him. Now, when EMS comes through, right, or other witnesses when they come through, pay close attention to what happens to the evidence, because you might have somebody that thinks that his knife is a really cool souvenir, and they might take it, okay? So if that happens, you got to make the police aware that, hey, he had a knife, somebody just grabbed it. But you got to see that happen and be able to give a description of the person that took that knife, okay, or that gun or whatever was there. Or if it gets moved, right, maybe EMS moves it out of the way, you got to be able to point that out to police. Or your shell cases, if they get kicked, if you were standing here, but then they end up getting kicked all the way down there, or the wind blows them all the way down there, you got to be able to make the police aware of that right then and there. That can't wait until later. That's gotta be told to them immediately, right then and there, so they can make a note of this. All right, they can see that yes, there is in fact wind, or in fact yes, there's a whole bunch of people that came through this area. They have to put that in their report. Okay. Witnesses, you got to point out the witnesses. That person was there. That person was there. I can't tell you the details. I got to talk to my lawyer. But those 3 or 4 people are witnesses. Please talk to them. Okay. And then lastly, you got to make that phone call to the lawyer. Okay. Now if you have the opportunity to make that call, sooner, right? get on the phone with your lawyer as soon as possible. I have a prepaid legal service. I've talked about this in other videos. Really briefly, I use U.S. Lawshield. It's like $40 a month. Oh, no, it's $40 up front, and then something like $10 a month. Okay, so it's only $10 a month, or actually $11 a month. And if you add your wife, it might go up to 15. And then I have a promo code for you guys. Let's get into focus. Promo code is Pocono Shooting. That gets you some discount. There's the website is uslawshield.com. There's a phone number. I think you got to register through the website in order to get the discount. So it's like I said, it's $40 up front, and then I think $11 to $15 a month, depending on what add-ons you have. And you've got a lawyer on call. Because here's the thing: if you're in a situation like this, that's not a good time to be looking for a lawyer. Okay. Normally, what's going to happen is if you're in jail, you call up your wife and you say, hey, or even if they don't arrest you, the next day you need a lawyer. You're calling around. They're going to tell you up front they need like a $1,500 retainer. Basically, you got to hand them $1,500 before they'll even discuss this case with you. Okay, maybe even $2,000 now with inflation. Okay, so you got to immediately put up $1,500 or $2,000 as a retainer with the lawyers. You got to, if you've got the prepaid legal service, right away you're set. You call these guys up. They're gonna get on the phone with the police. They're gonna tell them that, hey, they're representing you, and that they shouldn't ask you any questions. Okay, so that's really important. I mentioned this in every video that I do covering this matter, because if you start talking to the police, you're gonna make mistakes. Okay, you're gonna make mistakes. They're gonna ask you lots of questions not in the chronological order. They're just gonna throw questions at you from every direction, and you're gonna get the timing, the positioning. They're gonna ask you questions on different days. You're gonna give statements that don't match up, and what's gonna happen is, even if you don't do anything wrong, they're gonna hit you with a perjury charge or interfering with an investigation or some nonsense like that. So that's why you do not make detailed statements to police. You get the lawyer to do the talking for you. If a police officer is ever involved in a self-defense shooting, their own union tells the police officers to not say anything and get a union lawyer. Okay, so give yourself that same courtesy. So that's today's video on concealed carry. The difference between being scared and there being an actual danger. You got to be able to assess, to know the difference and assess the different danger levels, and be able to to identify and assess what you have to do, what's the right response. And like I said, it really helps if you take a couple of boxing classes where you get used to, thinking while somebody's, pounding your head in a little bit, because that's a real world type of situation. You got to be able to think on your feet like that. Drop some comments below. I'll put a link to the legal service. And I also have I've also created a playlist of all these concealed carry videos that I've been doing. I'll put a link to the playlist somewhere below in the comments as well. So I'll talk to you all soon.